one. Hi, I'm Amaya Keynes,
And I'm Allison Piper.
and our biodiversity project is amphibians.
So, starting off our presentation, we're going to be going over some distinguishing characteristics. So, these are characteristics that are consistent across all species and subspecies of amphibians. And they are leading dual lives, which means they live both in water and on land. They have moist, permeable skin that helps with respiration and water absorption, which makes them highly sensitive to their environmental changes. They undergo metamorphosis, which is transforming from aquatic larvae with gills to terrestrial adults with lungs. And they are all cold-blooded or ectothermic, meaning they rely on external temperatures to regulate their body heat, making them incredibly dependent on their surroundings. They have three-chambered hearts, which allow for a mix of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood circulation. Amphibians reproduce using either external or internal fertilization, with many of them laying jelly-like eggs in the water. And they possess both gills and lungs at different life stages, supporting their transition from water to land. And their limbs are adapted for their specific movements, whether that means jumping, swimming, or burrowing, depending on the different species of amphibian.
Now, our next topic is important subgroups. Our first subgroup is salamanders. Now, salamanders are sort of lizard-like creatures because they have slender bodies, long tails, and four legs. Now, you can kind of tell the difference between some salamanders, like, for example, a newt, because they are mostly on land. Their skin is very bumpy and very dry. But for sirens, they have lungs and gills, both. And they spend most of their time in the water. But besides that, salamanders are nocturnal creatures, which means that during the day, they are normally underneath a tree or maybe like around a rock because they like to be in a cooler environment. But once it's nighttime, that's when they go out to go get their food. They are also carnivores. So for smaller salamanders, they'll eat worms, slugs, and snails. But for large salamanders, they'll eat stuff like fish, small crustaceans like maybe a crab or a shrimp, or insects. Not only that, but salamanders have glands on their necks or their tails that can secrete a bad tasting or even poisonous liquid if they feel like they're in trouble. They can also protect themselves by squeezing their muscles together to create these really tiny needle-sharp tips that are like on their ribs to poke through their skin and prick their enemies. Lastly, if something bad did happen to them, they can also regenerate their limbs and damaged organs due to a special immune system.
Next up in the amphibians, we have frogs and toads. They are two very well-known groups that can sometimes be difficult to distinguish from one another, but some of the very notable characteristics are that frogs have smooth, moist skin, long, powerful legs for jumping, and a streamlined body that is suited for swimming. They prefer staying near water and they lay their eggs in clusters or masses. Toads, in contrast, have dry, bumpy skin, shorter legs, and are better suited for life on land. They lay eggs in long chains and often have more terrestrial lifestyle, though they return to the water to breed. They also have parotid glands that produce bufotoxin, which, like salamanders, is a poisonous toxin excreted through their skin that is either dangerous or tastes bad to predators to help protect them. Now, some similarities between the two is that almost all of them are carnivorous. Their diet consists of larger insects, flies, moths, and spiders, and some bigger frogs and toads eat mice, fish, scorpions, birds, snakes, and even other amphibians. And they both can puff up their bodies in an attempt to look bigger and inedible if a predator is nearby.
Our next subgroup is apodans or cicalians, and they are similar to snakes because they have no arms and no legs. They have tiny fish-like scales within the rings on their skin, and they also have tiny eyes For some of them, they're in like under the skin, and then for others, it's their eyes are in their skull. They also have dozens of really tiny needle sharp teeth, and Caecilians or apodans are mostly known for being underground because they're burrowers, so they travel through tunnels underneath the ground. Lastly, they are carnivorous, just like toads, frogs, and salamanders. So we can mostly see them eating invertebrates like worms, insects like beetles and termites. They can eat reptiles like lizards and small snakes. And then sometimes they even eat other amphibians like frogs and even other apodants.
Next up, we have the evolutionary history of amphibians. So, amphibians evolved from lobe-finned fish or sarcopterygi. Please do not quote me on that pronunciation. I have no idea. Which were around 360 million years ago during the Devonian period. Now, early amphibians were the first vertebrates to move from water to land, and they developed limbs and lungs for terrestrial life. Over time, amphibians evolved stronger limbs, lungs for air breathing, and permeable skin for respiration, but they still required water for reproduction. By the late Paleozoic and early Mesozoic, amphibians diversified into frogs, salamanders, and caecilians, each adapting to their different environments. And amphibians faced a decline after the Mesozoic era and now face threats like habitat loss, disease, and climate change, which has resulted in many different endangered species across amphibians.
Our next topic is ecological significance. Now, firstly, they are a large benefit to agriculture and human health because they eat insect pests, and which is not good for our crops, or when they eat them, it is good for our crops. And they also eat mosquitoes, which is very good for our health and for other animals like cows and so on. Not only that, but they are exceptional indicators of ecosystem health. This is because of their really moist, permeable skin, so they can absorb toxic waste if it's in their environment. Not only that, but because they need water around them majority of the time, if the environment that they're in is going through a drought, we will be able to see that through them. Also, they are a very important part of the food chain. They provide food for numerous different animals, from maybe snakes to even large birds. And in some parts of the US, frogs are also harvested for human consumption.
So we do have a couple of topics of interest in terms of amphibians, the first being metamorphosis, which is, of course, the transformation from aquatic larvae to terrestrial adults in species like frogs and salamanders. Then there is the conservation efforts, which is focusing on the global decline in amphibian populations, which is caused by habitat loss, disease, and climate change. And there are several articles on conservation efforts that are in place to help undo some of the damage that has been done. There are a couple of topics of communication, which is how frogs and toads will use their vocalizations, such as calls, to communicate during mating seasons or to establish territories, and it can differ between different subspecies of frogs or toads. And then there's skin and respiration, which is the role of amphibian skin in their respiration and the unique ability to absorb oxygen and water through their skin.
Our second part of topics of interest, we first start with adaptations for survival. Now, amphibians have gone through a lot of adaptations for survival. Like for frogs, they have jumping. For caecilians or apodans, there is burrowing. And then for salamanders, they have aquatic behaviors like swimming and probably diving and so on. And all of this stuff helps amphibians thrive in their diverse environments. Now, next, there is chytridiomycosis. I think I said that wrong. I'm really sorry if I did. And then other diseases. Now, specifically for the first word, that is a fungal disease that occurs mostly within frogs, and this can lead to heart failure sometimes, skin damage, and also an imbalance in water and salt within the body. So clearly, this can lead to a decreased amphibian population, and there are not that many efforts to combat these diseases. Next, there's evolution and fossils. The evolutionary history of amphibians, including fossil discoveries of ancient species and their adaptations from aquatic to terrestrial life. Lastly, there's reproduction and development. The reproductive strategies of amphibians, including external fertilization, egg laying, and care for offspring. And that's all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And there, let's stop.